Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Stephen here from the Red Lessons channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today it's my honor and my pleasure to have my good friend David Ball on my YouTube channel.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. And for those of you who don't know, David is a published author, but he's also spent some time living in Saudi Arabia and Oman.
Correct.
So you're very familiar with the Amouage house, which is the reason why we have all of these bottles here in front of us right now.
That's right.
So the first question that I want to ask you, because I guess we'll kind of make this into more of a discussion style rather than an interview.
Sure.
So feel free to take it in which direction you think. The first question I had for you is, how did you get into fragrances?
Well, my initial experience with fragrance was when I was growing up in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
In the late 70s and early 80s, because I'm a little older than you, and starting to use aftershave and cologne as a way to be distinctive. And there are things that have changed in the years past that I have detected when I compare the vintage scents to those that are here now.
Right.
But specifically Middle Eastern scents have become of great interest to me as a result of living in the Middle East. I went to the Middle East in October of 1999. I was practicing as an attorney in New Orleans. And I had the opportunity to go and work for a firm there simply because I had studied Arabic when I was a graduate student, and they needed an Arabic-speaking attorney.
Okay.
So October 1999, I went there, and that was when the world of Middle Eastern fragrance opened up to me.
Right. And now, like you said to me off camera, there's a big difference when it comes to the culture there.
Correct.
So typically, men over there would wear rose, and they don't view that as being feminine.
Right. The normal Western preconception is that there are certain scents that are masculine, like oak moss, for example, cypress, leather, tobacco, and there are others that are feminine, rose, jasmine, ylang ylang. That distinction doesn't exist in the Middle East. So in Middle Eastern fragrance, whatever a man wears, a woman can wear as well, with the possible exception of a very old, aged, and very strong oud.
Right.
But even women will use oud, but it's mixed with something. So you have rose, for example, which is an incredibly strong fragrance, and one that you cannot use pure. Because if you distill rose petals, so you take thousands of pounds of rose petals, and imagine how many rose petals that is, and you distill them into a water, rose water, which is what all of you have heard of, that product will be so strong and so acerbic that you can't tolerate it on your skin or on your clothing. I one time had the experience of being in a place in Oman where someone was distilling rose water, and she took the cap and touched it to my shirt, and I couldn't get the smell. She just touched it. First of all, it was brown, which is strange in and of itself.
Yeah.
And it gave off such a horrible vinegary smell that it was almost like rotten fruit. And it wasn't until 4 or 5 days later, after washing the shirt, that the smell of rose came out. So you can imagine that if you're using rose in a fragrance, the essential thing is to know how to mix it. So using rose alone is not possible. Because if you do, you're simply not going to be able to wear it. It's going to make you want to retch, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas if you mix it, and that's where the art of perfumery lies, knowing how to mix it. And that's what I learned in the Middle East. And I learned it not only from trolling through marketplaces and speaking to vendors, and actually going and seeing how these various ingredients are produced, But by coming into contact with an industry at that time in the Sultanate of Oman, which was very small, it was only a local market, and the name was Amouage, and Amouage in Arabic means waves. So I visited them when they were first getting off the ground.
And they were a cottage industry.
They were a tiny little, it was basically run in a shack behind another house. And the ownership of the company, of course, always had someone very high up in the government, because the goal of the Sultan of Oman, as I understood it from back then, was to create a fragrance that would be the most luxurious fragrance in the world. And cost was no object. So we want to create something that is the best in the world using local ingredients only, and it will be the best in the world. So when I went into their laboratory in 2002, 2003, what I discovered was that they were actually distilling frankincense in flasks about this big in the laboratory. It was an amazing experience because I had seen frankincense before, but I had never seen it being reduced to its essential form, which is a yellowish oil. Those days are gone.
Unfortunately.
Those days are gone because Amouage has rightly become a worldwide company. It's known all over the world. When I first started going there and learning about how to mix perfumes, it didn't extend beyond the Arabian Gulf. You could find it in Bahrain, you could find it occasionally in Qatar, but you couldn't find it anyplace else. Now it's all over the world, including in Russia. I understand they were even selling in Israel. So it's all over the world.
Well, that has certainly been a topic of discussion too, because if you take a look at these first 8 fragrances, if I'm counting correctly, they all have the non-magnetic cap. And then you take a look at the one of the newer releases by the company, which is Fate Man, which is still a few years old. This has the magnetic cap. And since they implemented the magnetic caps, they also reformulated most of their fragrances. So a lot of people on the online community are saying that it doesn't last as long, or maybe it smells slightly different, and they've even gone through with discontinuing one or more of them.
Correct.
Which is unfortunate.
Is Dia still being produced? I'm not sure.
I think Dia is, but CL?
CL is. And CL was one of the light summer fragrances that I remember them making. And the reason I remember it specifically is because it was a light blue color. So they actually, for that one, as I recall, had to use coloring, which if you are into natural perfumes is something that you want to stay away from. You want to stay away from colorants. My favorite, you asked me before we started filming what my favorite was, it would probably be Lyric because of my passion for rose in any of its forms. However, I find the latest iteration of Lyric is different from the one when it first came out. I should tell you that Lyric was always produced in this bottle. However, Dia, and do you have gold here?
I do not. I've never owned that one.
Gold and Dia were the 2 first fragrances. They used to be sold in, if I'm not mistaken, Swarovski crystal bottles.
Wow.
Which were actually carved in the form of a khanjar. And for those of you who don't know what the khanjar is,
I've seen pictures of that online.
Right. That's where this comes from. And this was the demand of the owners of the company, that it had to be bottled in something that represented Oman. And if you look in the encyclopedia or on the internet at the flag of Oman, you'll see that it has a khanjar on it, a dagger. And those daggers are worn ceremonially by men on their waist. You can see a picture. I have one at home that was given to me as a gift when I worked there. But I didn't bring it with me, but
Yeah.
the original bottle had that cap, which was plated in gold.
Wow.
Actual gold. Now, of course, these are mass produced. That doesn't exist anymore. The bottles are fine, they're nice, but my opinion is that they've lost a lot when they abandoned Swarovski crystal.
Right.
The price is the same because gold was always their most expensive fragrance, and if I recall correctly, it was the same price back then in 2003 that it is now. So.
Right. Wow. And yes, I too have an affinity for rose. I love rose, I love iris, orange blossom, and you had me try a couple of fragrances
Yes.
off camera.
Yes.
So I'm wearing Rose de Petra by Stefan Humbert Lucas, and I'm also wearing Rose de Taif,
Yes.
Taif being a city in Saudi Arabia,
Right.
and this one is by Paris Monte Carlo. And just as you described it, you spray it on, it smells very vinegary.
Right.
And now that it's dried down, it actually smells a lot better, so
Correct.
I'm quite enjoying it.
Correct.
But that's not something that I ever got from Lyric Man, which is also one of our favorites, and I rated it very highly on my channel.
Yes.
Now,
I recall.
if you were to have a second favorite from the line, which one would it be? And
Right.
it doesn't have to be one that's healing.
I think the second one would be Dia.
Okay.
As I said, the two oldest ones were Gold and Dia.
Yeah.
And the way they were produced originally, which was with all natural ingredients, was the way that I preferred them.
Yeah.
When Amouage, like every other international perfume company, sells in the European Union, there are certain requirements about contents of perfume. Unfortunately, the prevailing view among legislators around the world, and I'm sorry to all of the viewers out there if I sound like a lawyer, but this is legal.
But you are a lawyer.
This is legal, right? The problem is that if you produce a bottle of Lyric using natural ingredients, it is like a bottle of wine because the rose that goes into it, the amber that goes into it, the musk, the ambergris, the various other notes that we can go down the list, I don't have it memorized,
Yeah.
they are all natural, which means that from year to year, even from batch to batch, will change.
Yeah.
Well, when you start selling perfume internationally on a large scale, you must guarantee that the item you are selling is hypoallergenic, which means it doesn't cause a rash or any sort of skin irritation, and you have to guarantee that one batch of any fragrance, so you pick any of them here, this one or this one, year after year, has to smell exactly the
consistent.
same. There can't be any difference. And I, as a fragrance lover like you, have never understood that because those of us who cross the border into wine, for example, I was a lover of wine, they call it enophile. We look for differences from one vintage to another. The same brand, the same house, the same vineyard, yet year to year it tastes different. The same, I think, could be expected of a perfume that is produced using natural ingredients.
Right.
And I think it should only be part of the equation. But no, the prevailing view in the industry is that to comply with export regulations and import regulations throughout the world, you have to make sure that this bottle of Lyric that is sold in Singapore is going to smell the same as the one that is sent to Turkey.
Which was produced a year or two later.
Correct. Correct.
So the inclusion of more synthetic ingredients isn't just because of the regulations that are imposed by the IFRA, but it's also used as a means of maintaining consistency year after year.
Correct.
That's interesting.
But I think, Stephen, that they've lost a lot. And I'm not talking about Amouage. I'm talking about the perfume industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there are still companies out there, niche producers, or what we call in other industries artisans, who are using natural ingredients, staying away from chemical compounds because they tend to be chemicals. The problem with using chemicals in perfumes is that often you cannot get the smell of the chemical out. So as soon as you open a bottle, I'll give you an example, and we can do a show on this also. I have a bottle of Brut by Fabergé from the 70s. I also have a bottle of Brut that I bought in my drugstore a couple of months ago. The same exact product. One produced by Fabergé, which was one of the greatest companies in France in its day. And then you have Brut, which is produced by the current owner of the mark. You smell one, and it takes you to another plane. You open the other bottle, the same fragrance, and all you get is whiffs of alcohol, this nasty after smell.
And it's a shadow totally of its former self.
It's a shadow of its former self, because if you look at the ingredients, fragrance comes, someplace in the middle, if not at the end, and everything else is a variety of chemicals. So I think that Amouage and other companies in the Middle East that use what are traditionally called strong scents. So I'm talking now about rose, oud, musk, amber, patchouli, jasmine. They're all considered strong scents. When you use them naturally and you know how to blend them, like knowing how to blend a scotch or knowing how to blend vintages of wine to produce a bottle of wine that people are going to love. If you start using chemicals to replace any of those scents, which is not easy, all you do is send the stuff out to a laboratory and get it put into testing, and they separate the compounds and they tell you what it's made of, and you buy those from a chemical supply store, and then you start mixing. I mean, there's no great mystery to this, but we lost something when we went away from the natural stuff. So the days that thankfully I had the fortune of witnessing, when they were taking the frankincense from the Dhofar province of Oman, that's where it grows, that's where it's grown since biblical times. They were taking myrrh from down there. They were taking other ingredients, all from Oman. They were taking them, distilling them, reducing them to their essences. And I think you wound up with a product which was exciting, because with every bottle, you wound up with something distinctive. It was the same fragrance, but there was always, like with wine, there were vintages. I bought this bottle this year, and it smells delicious, and the next year might have something else in it that's a little different. So that doesn't exist anymore. You can be sure that, I know you had Jubilation 25 here someplace, and I'm sorry I keep pushing my glasses up, because
I do that too.
It's a habit that I've never gotten out of. It was an affectation, because I was told when I was a trial attorney that if you want to look serious in front of a jury, you should always push your glasses down. Anyway, we can get into jury stuff in a moment. But do you have any questions about Amouage that we haven't?
There is something. You mentioned that the caps resemble the Khanjar.
Yes.
The women's bottles represent something too, right?
Yes, they do. They resemble the cupola, or the dome, on the Sultan Qaboos Mosque, which is in Muscat. So the biggest mosque in the country is the Sultan Qaboos Mosque, which is on the highway coming from the airport to the city. So that the women's fragrances are typically sold in smaller bottles, because they are generally eau de parfum, P-A-R-F-U-M. Some people say eau de parfum, but it's eau de parfum. Or extrait de parfum, extract of perfume, which is the strongest. you're getting 30 to 35% of the fragrance, whereas with eau de parfum you're getting 20 to 25. Eau de toilette you're getting
15 to 20, and it
20.
depends on the company too.
Correct.
And that's typically what we see even nowadays. If you were to walk into like a Macy's or a Sephora, it's typically the women's scents that are available in eau de parfum concentration, whereas the men's are available in eau de toilette.
Correct.
Now, it's been super enlightening to have somebody with your knowledge and your intelligence about the perfume industry, and you know so much about the company Amouage, and you worked as a translator for some time. But I also have something here in front of me that you gifted me a copy of it. Not this copy in particular, but you are a published author.
Yes.
And you have a book called TRIPTYCH.
Yes.
And this is anecdotal, so this is something that you personally experienced.
It's all based on things that I experienced as a lawyer, first studying and then working in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Then going overseas. So yes, in a sense, there was a British author whose name I can't remember right now, who said once that all fiction is autobiography, and all autobiography is fiction. So in the sense that this is being sold as fiction, I think Amazon has it listed as true crime, actually. They're the ones who categorized it. Okay. It is anecdotal in the sense that it's based on my own experience. And there is a tie-in actually to the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Triptych, as you know, in a church, when you go into a church, at the end of the nave on the altar, there is usually a panel, 3 views, okay? That's what a triptych is. It's an icon or a religious symbol in 3. This book takes 3 different looks at a new religion, which is very bizarre, and which stemmed out of a religious manuscript that was written in a language that normally is not written, which is the Guarani language spoken in Paraguay. It's not typically a written language, but this manuscript was written in Guarani with additions in some in a Semitic language, similar to Arabic or Maltese, and also some Spanish. My connection with this was that while I was teaching many years ago in Paraguay, I heard of this religion, which is very simple, has 5 rules. I'm not going to spoil the surprise for anybody that wants to read it, because it will send you out of your mind, because you're going to say, this can't possibly be true, but think about it. It is true. And I also, when I became a lawyer, or when actually it was before I became a lawyer. When I was a law student, I came into contact with one of my fellow students whom I never really liked. I kind of found him obnoxious, to be honest with you. He was getting involved in a case in which a guy selling insurance in New Orleans was accused of killing his wife in furtherance of this religion.
Wow.
Now imagine the coincidence. This is something I heard about in the 80s and forgot about. Simply wiped it out of my mind. And here I am in another country, in another city, and all of a sudden I wind up hearing from one of my classmates that they're getting involved in a case that's pitting freedom of religion against freedom to kill, basically. Wow. As it says on the back of the book, does freedom of religion mean freedom to kill?
Wow.
Okay, the coincidence gets even weirder, because after this case goes through and you have not only the religious text on which these murders were premised in here, I'm the one who did the new translation of it, because my classmate, Andrew Sear, who has disappeared off the face of the earth, I know, people may say this is too weird. It isn't. He existed and now he doesn't exist. He did, I don't know, he may be dead, and if he's listening out there, hi, I'm here.
Please send us a
Or
message.
send us a message. He got me involved in translating this book from Guarani because when I was in Paraguay in the 80s, I learned the language because I was out in the countryside. And most of the peasants, people living out in the country, speak it. So I learned it. I translated this new, based on an old translation and based on the original text. So that's in here also. Mm-hmm. A decision of the US Supreme Court, which has never been published, is in here. And then the weirdest part, perhaps, of this whole story is when all of the separate strings that unite all of the three stories, the three characters and the three stories in three different countries get pulled together. And I realized that that was happening when I lived in Saudi Arabia and I was being followed. And I was being followed by someone for several months. My phone was being tapped. Then I came back to the United States and it continued for quite a while. Now I know that this sounds really wacky and that's okay.
I believe you.
Even if it didn't happen, it's a good story. And it's something that particularly nowadays should make people think.
Right.
One of the nicest comments that was made about this book, which I read on Amazon in the reviews section, was it was a disturbingly captivating read, in which the book grew every time he thought about it. Wow. So it's a short book. It's only 174 pages, but there's a lot of stuff included in here. This book literally took me 13 years to write. And the reason that it took 13 years is there were parts of it that I couldn't write because the people involved were still around. I was afraid to write some of it. I didn't want to, get my phones tapped again. I have people following me again. I sort of related all of the issues.
Yes.
And again, I know all of this sounds strange. John le Carré, Tinker Tailor Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah.
And it may be all of that. Sometimes we tend to see patterns in things where patterns don't exist.
Yeah.
But everything that has been meaningful to me in my life is in this book, including the Middle East, which is why we brought it up here, because we were talking about fragrance. My entree into the fragrance world, particularly into niche fragrances, was through the Middle East. Had I never lived in the Middle East, I never would have delved into rose and how to mix rose and how to round it out and how to use oud and the other things that are out there. Because believe me, friends, anybody who thinks that you can simply take musk or ambergris and use it however you want in a fragrance is wrong. These are all highly repulsive scents. I was looking for a word.
On their own, right?
On their own.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take ambergris, I was in Oman once, in the southern part of Oman, in Salalah, which is where frankincense is harvested. And one of the perfume merchants brought out ambergris to me. He said, "Have you ever smelled ambergris?" And I said, "No, I've heard about it, but I've never smelled it." "Well, do you know what it is?" And I said, "Yes, it's the vomit of a sperm whale."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, that's right." And he said, "Have you ever seen what it looks like?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, let me show it to you." And he brought out something that was wrapped in newspaper. He opened it up, and I mean, he didn't even start to unfold the paper, and the smell was like a public restroom. It was the most repulsive scent. that you can imagine. I said, what on earth are you going to do with this? He
Yeah.
says, do you know how much this costs? And he told me some outrageous number. And he said, this is going to be sold to perfume makers. I said, what do they do with this? And he said, well, of course, they have to make an essence of it, and they use tiny amounts to balance other ingredients. But all of that stuff, of course, we can talk about in another show. You know, I'm trying to come back. You know?
There's just so much information and so much ground to cover, and I'm just sitting here and I'm listening to you, and you know, I'm just trying to take it all in. I'm trying to be like a sponge because the wealth of information I just. But I do want to thank you.
I would like to offer to do something. I've been, you know, a faithful subscriber of Redolessence.
Thank you.
You know, for a long time. I'm also your friend.
Yeah.
But I want to do something that you are in the habit of doing. So I want to do a giveaway. So
thank you.
I want to do a giveaway of one copy of TRIPTYCH. I'll even autograph it to the person who wins it. The only thing that I would ask is that you subscribe to Redolessence, you like the video, you write a comment. It can be about anything that we've talked about, or it can be about the book. I really think you'll enjoy it, and I hope that you will tell people where to find it, which I assume you will.
Of course I will. Yeah, the links are going to be down below.
And for any comments, of course, you can always contact me through Redolessence. But it's been my pleasure, and I know we've only scratched the surface. We can talk about Middle Eastern fragrances all night, and maybe we will another day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this is really great information for those of you out there who just want to learn more about the perfume industry. Maybe Amouage happens to be one of your favorite houses and you wanted an inside look into the company and how they do things or how they used to do things. And thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge.
It's really my pleasure.
Thank you, David.
Thank you
for coming to Jersey
Stephen.
so I didn't have to go to Brooklyn.
That's okay. You're always welcome in Brooklyn.
I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
So once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in winning a copy, I plan on reading this during my spring break, which is going to be a week from today. Today's date is March 25th. So definitely leave a comment down below about anything. It could be about Amouage. What's your favorite Amouage fragrance? What do you think about the book so far and the premise? And you'll be entered to win. And I'm going to announce the giveaway winner in 1 week's time.
Worldwide. Postage paid. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, David.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much. Definitely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.